Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's chat. My name is Tara, and I'm a team member here at Understood. Today, we're going to be talking about organization tips for the new school year, and we're so excited to have Mark Griffin, PhD, joining us. Hi, Mark, how are you?
Hey, Sarah, how are you? Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Mark, would you like to take a moment just to briefly introduce yourself to those who are joining us?
Sure. I am a practitioner through and through. I've been in the field for more than 4 decades, a little bit more, maybe even a lot more than 4 decades. I helped found a boarding and day school for kids with learning disabilities and attention issues.
Okay.
I'm a psychologist and special educator by training. And I've had the privilege over, 35, almost 40 of those 4+ decades to work directly with kids in a school setting and live with kids in a school setting and watch them as they both struggled and came to a point where they developed great strategies and things. So I've had an awful lot of opportunity to learn from kids in a way that you don't get the opportunity to just in a graduate school classroom or other way. I'm a member of the board of directors of the National Center for Learning Disabilities and have been a consultant to the Poses Family Foundation and an expert on Understood since the beginning of Understood. Also have been a member of the National Joint Committee on Learning Disabilities. And continue to, even in our sort of semi-retirement, keep our hand in the field and keep working directly to help change outcomes for kids with learning and attention issues. So it's my pleasure to be here today.
And we're so happy to have you. Thanks, Mark, for that introduction. I do want to remind those joining us that we will be taking parent questions. We will try to get to as many as we can, so feel free to ask your questions. It is helpful if you are detailed and you provide your child's age and grade so that Mark can give a more direct response, and you can put those questions in the chat box below. So let's get started. Mark, we know that keeping up in school can be hard, regardless of those who are learning and thinking differently. So I have to start by asking you, why do kids have trouble with organization?
Well, what we've learned over time, both I think in terms of research and for people like me as practitioners, is that most kids, certainly you hesitate to say all about anything associated with kids with learning and attention issues, but most kids with attention issues and a great number of kids with learning issues really struggle with organization. It generally happens because most of the time those kids are struggling with executive function skills, which are a series of skills. Some people think there are 6 or 7, some people think there are as many as 10, but essentially they are the things that help us kind of organize the world and deal with the world in a way that allows us to start tasks and stay on task and finish tasks and gauge how much energy and how much we're going to have to bring to the task. And so for kids who struggle in those areas, it's not unsurprising that they were going to have, it's not surprising that they would be having difficulty with organization. Kids with executive function issues struggle with working memories, so they're not quite sure what they should hold on to and what they should get rid of before they start a task. They're not very good at planning and organizing. They get distracted, so they start something else catches their attention, they come back, they're sort of in the middle of it, but they can't remember what they were doing. They don't necessarily have all the materials. If we wrote down every single time a parent called us at our own school and said, guess what, didn't make it home today, either the whole backpack or the backpack, but not a lot of the assignments. Kids have trouble shifting gears. They have trouble understanding when they've been at recess and they come back in that there needs to be an inside voice instead of an outside voice. They have trouble with emotional control. They have trouble self-monitoring. So sometimes kids who struggle with this kind of organization don't even know when they have drifted, and therefore they're not staying organized or staying focused on the task at hand. So when you think about the school day, and certainly even outside of school, but focus on the school day, which has a very set kind of protocol of demands and expectations, for a child who's not able to process and organize those things, school can be a very complex and nebulous and non-predictable kind of environment. And we as practitioners and parents who happen to have children who have learning and attention issues need to understand that this is not being done to irritate us or because the child is lazy or because he's not invested. For a lot of kids, it's just very, very difficult to do the organizational things that seem to come easy for other kids. And so it's almost universal that kids with learning and attention issues, because, ADHD is really an immaturity in the development of the brain, that we are going to see some things in those kids that we don't necessarily expect to see in kids that do a lot of other things really well. But if I were to say out of the 250 children that we had in our own program, there might have been 10 kids who actually were organized when they arrived at the program. The rest of the kids required us to sort of scaffold the day and to help them organize, help them develop strategies, help them develop those strategies again and again and again, and convince them that they were strategies that would work over time. And we used a lot of different things, which I'm sure we'll talk about during the rest of this chat, to help kids do those things more effectively, so that they were spending most of their time taking their good thoughts and having a way to organize them effectively. But I think left to their own devices, even though most kids with learning and attention issues would love to be organized, it just doesn't happen very easily for them.
Got it. I do have a follow-up question to that. You mentioned organization and then executive functioning issues, and I wanted to know, is there always a direct correlation between the two, or can there be other learning?
Yeah, I think, again, most kids don't have all the executive function issues associated with that sort of spectrum of executive function.
Okay.
Some kids will have one or two things, but a good number of kids with executive function issues who happen to also have ADHD, certainly, or attentional issues, certainly are kids who find organization as a sort of tool to be something that's very hard for them to acquire naturally. So it's not that they can't come to a point where organization is reasonable, but we would say that for a lot of kids, while the executive functions themselves are not organization taken together, that allows us to organize things and to initiate things and to stay with things and to complete things in a reasonable fashion.
Okay.
So we're employing a series of executive functions to make that happen. When you happen to have an executive function system that's not functioning the way you'd like it to, it usually encompasses some form of struggling to stay organized or stay focused long enough to get things done, to start, in the middle, and the end. So it really, I wouldn't say they're holding hands.
Okay.
Close to it.
Okay, got it. Thanks so much for clearing that up. My next question for you is, what are some ways, let's get into the fun stuff, what are some ways that parents can help teach organization skills at home? Yeah,
I mean, there are a million, happily, there are a lot of ways that parents can do those kinds of things, because home is filled with stuff that allows us to do that. One of the first things we tell parents to do if they're beginning to wonder if their child is really struggling with organization, and it's important to say that at times all kids are a little bit disorganized. Maybe they have anxiety about something, they're discombobulated, they can't find something, so they're not particularly interested in organizing anything else. But we're talking about kids who chronically have difficulty meeting demands and expectations that require organization. So we always say to parents, kind of watch your child in a very intentional way over a 2 or 3 week period. And Understood has a wonderful little help in terms of logging things and taking notes in a very intentional way as you look at particular behaviors, because lots of parents say, he's just so scattered, there's no pattern to this. Well, if you watch it for 2 or 3 weeks, you usually find that there are some common threads. Obviously, if you knew all the common threads, it'd be very easy to help this child, and it's not as easy as we'd like to think it is. Okay. But it will give you a sense of what kinds of situations make him less organized. Is it around writing tasks? Is it around getting ready to go to bed? Is it around getting up in the morning and getting out the door with all the stuff you're supposed to have? Is it because you can't get into the bathroom and do the hygiene things that you're supposed to do because you can't remember the routine of what you're going to do? So having that information really helps parents begin to take a look at when things occur. If there are triggers and they're sort of persistent triggers, That's very good information.
Okay.
Once you have all that, there are a series of things that you really can do. We know for a fact that kids with attentional issues and learning issues thrive on structure. So when things are predictable, when they have a clear sense of what the expectations are, when they have a clear sense of what the timeline for those expectations are, it's much, much easier. So as many things as you can establish routines for, whether it's getting everything for the next morning ready the night before, that works best for your child because of the fact that he or she likes to get up in the morning and know the backpack really has all the homework in it. You've gone over that. It's in the color-coded folder.
Okay.
It's in the done file. All of those things are ready, but you've laid out, if you can get away with it, one set of clothes for tomorrow. Maybe you have to lay out two, so there's a choice in the morning, but through your observation, you get a sense of whether or not your child can actually pick it out the night before and then not change his mind in the morning. Breakfast routines, making sure, sometimes it's as simple as honestly having a menu for the week. So this child knows on Tuesday morning he agreed that oatmeal was a good idea. And so you're not having a struggle with getting somebody down and getting them ready and getting them off to the bus. So establishing routines wherever they possibly can be for the whole family, not just for this youngster. Most families find that generally routines in some areas are good things to do. But for kids with attentional issues and learning issues, establishing routines are critically important. It's important really with older kids and with younger kids as well, but really with older kids, to talk to your child. Kids are resistant sometimes to getting organized because it's a pain in the neck and it's boring. They don't necessarily want to do that. And for sort of middle school kids on up and maybe even some upper elementary school kids, it's important to sit down and say, what if I could change your life and make it 25% more efficient? So you'd have 25% more time to do the things you wanted to do without me asking you, nudging you, pushing you to get things done, and explain how the routines, how the checklists, how the big board calendar in the kitchen or wherever you want to put it, how all those things really help him or her take a piece of this organizational difficulty off the table, because it's up there in front of you. Yourself. So sometimes explaining the rationale that initially this is not going to be that easy to do, but certainly that later on, once it's been established, you'll save yourself a heck of a lot of time and you'll be prepared to go to school, to go to your soccer practice, to go to an overnight at your friends, because of the fact that you have this sort of routine, a bunch of checklists and things. And you want to involve the child as much as possible in establishing all these things so you get better buy-in. Chores, cooking, all of those things that require organization and kind of a beginning and a middle and an end. Cooking in terms of there's always a sequence to what you do first, what you do second, how you measure things out. What does a pinch of salt really look like? Doing fun things that allow kids to begin to develop strategies without even know that they're developing strategies help a lot. Organizers, containers. We had our own child with attentional issues, really smart, really capable kid, great athlete, but scattered as scattered can be. We had bins for everything. So we had bins for the field hockey stuff. We had bins for school. We had bins for if you were going to somebody's place over the weekend, the toiletry stuff that you needed, all those other kinds of things, so that it was always ready to go. And she wasn't at the last minute running around saying, where's my whatchamacallit, because I can't go to Susie's house unless I have that. And it took us, in her mid-40s, I will tell you, she's still sort of doing the same kinds of things on a different level. So it has helped her all the way through. Kids should really get a planner of some sort, and having that start at home, even though it will be applied at school, is a really good idea. If schools allow an electronic planner, either through a tablet or something like that, that's great. The kids would much prefer to do that, I'm sure, than write the thing down. But I can't say enough that the more that you eliminate I didn't take the assignment down, I'll try to call my friend and see if she did. Whoops, I got the assignment, but I don't have the worksheet. The more that you can eliminate the mundane parts of the planning piece, the better off it's going to be.
Got it.
homework routine. It's critical to have a homework routine and a place to do it. It doesn't have to be a permanent place. In fact, Understood has a wonderful series of how to set up the kind of a homework station and how to set up a portable one if you need the space for other things at other points in time. And the homework routine probably can be fluid, and that is, it doesn't have to be you must start your homework at 6:15. But it might be interesting to do it on a 2 or 3 day schedule. Most kids like to come home and shoot hoops in the driveway if they happen to have one, ride a bike, do something like that. But hold on, I don't know if you're seeing this, but I'll get rid of it. If you're not seeing it, I won't worry about it. It's reminding me to do something here. There we go.
I don't know here.
Whatever it happens to be, to allow this child to have some time for some downtime after school. School's really tiring for kids with learning and attention issues,
right.
But make sure that there's a consensus about a range of time, at least, when this homework is going to get done. So you're not fighting that all the time, every single day. Cultivate an interest in collecting. It doesn't have to be stamps. Kids collect all kinds of stuff, and they naturally categorize them. We had a grandchild who loved these little Matchbox cars, and he would categorize them in all different kinds of ways and then change the categorization of things. And all the time you're building organizational skills and classification skills in a way that is fun. So I think you can do it with almost anything. Chores, getting ready to go on a vacation, checklist for when you're getting ready to go to your friends for the afternoon to make sure you have all the kinds of things that you have. And more you want to shift that over to the child. But in the beginning, you're going to find that you're going to do most of the work simply because the child, again, left to his own devices, doesn't know where to start. He doesn't know how to do that.
Got it. We do have a few specific questions from parents that I do want to make sure we get to. So our first one comes from Paula. Paula says, my daughter is starting 6th grade. She is 11, and I'm worried about her remembering her schedule for changing classes. Do you have any tips?
Remember, I'm a little bit behind you again this time, or you're a little bit behind me. Did you say the schedule?
Yes, for remembering her schedule for changing classes.
Yeah.
Just wondering if you have any tips.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the easiest thing is to take the schedule itself, make about a dozen copies, not one,
okay.
And put it in the front of a binder and tape it in a way that it's unlikely to fall out. You also can there are lots of apps that are out there. Understood has a great thing called the Tech Finder that has a plethora of apps that help you stay organized. Again, if you can use a mobile device or you can use a tablet at school, there are tons of schedules that are easily put in. Rather than fumbling with that, it may be just as easy to put it in the front of a notebook and make sure that your child knows that you have enough of them, that if she loses one every week or even every 3 days, that you can replace those kinds of things. And it'll be interesting because I think when kids tend to look at it a lot, over time they begin to establish that schedule in their head. But in the meantime, the simplest thing and most unobtrusive thing is simply to have it in the front of your folder. So as you're going off to your next class, if you're in middle school, you just open the folder like you're looking to put your homework in. There it is right in front of you. It's Tuesday, even if it's a block schedule and it's shifting all the time, you certainly can have that right there in front of you so that you don't have to worry about where it is. But I would not put it in the folder I would staple it, bolt it, do something to the front of the folder so that it stays there most of the time, and anticipate that it's likely to be lost over some period of time. And you might even want to, if your child's anxious about it, put a couple of spares in the back of the binder, in the little sleeve in the back of the binder. But kids will use those things. Again, if you say to them, look, if you hold on to this, you're going to be 25 times less anxious than you are right now that you're going to go off to the right class. Kids will use those. And some kids may want the electronic thing. It's just pulling out your tablet when everybody else is folding their stuff up and getting off to the next class, maybe a little more obtrusive.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Our next parent has a 16-year-old boy with ADHD and executive function issues. How do I help a high school student with no organizational skills?
Well, I think partnering with the school is critically important in I think as kids get older, that can become easier or more difficult depending upon who the child is and how much he wants to engage the people at school. But schools are usually very willing to do a variety of things. In high schools, I certainly know that our own high school, when we were in Connecticut, would, for kids who had those kinds of needs and needed accommodations on the organizational side, they would set up a system where every day all of the assignments, short-term and long-term, were emailed home. There was a template that was put together. It was simple to put together, emailed home so that the parent had a backup piece for the youngster when he got home. In school itself, again, there are specific apps, and I'm happy to talk about some of them, but Understood has gone out of their way to create a tremendously good tech finder that's available on the Understood website. But things like, Evernote and Write Ideas and things, all of those can be used on a phone, and they allow you to, as things are being given to you as assignments, to put those down. There are other apps that allow you to take pictures of what's up on the board if the assignment is up on the board on the left-hand side of the board, so you don't have to worry about running out of time and doing that sort of thing. Some of the traditional things that work very, very well are graphic organizers for writing, programs like Inspiration that allow a youngster to literally put down all his ideas in kind of little boxes, press a little button at the end, and you come up with an outline that makes sense so that when you go back to it again, you're not fumbling to find your notes, you're not trying to remember what you thought was a good idea. It's all there and it's all in front of you. And so working with the schools are great because they really get to see your child in a very different venue. Okay. So they know when they are sitting in a class and they've just assigned a writing assignment to your 9th grader or your 10th grader, they have the opportunity over a long period of time to take a look at what the response to that is, whether it actually gets written down, whether it doesn't. Again, schools, particularly schools under the RTI and MTSS programs, which are multi-tiered systems of support, seem very willing to scaffold some of this stuff for to the beginning. So as much information as they need to make sure that they can get started. So if it's more information than 80% of the rest of the class needs, that's okay. Obviously, the hope is, and the outcome we're looking for is over time, the child will develop the kind of strategies he needs in order to make that happen. But I think that parents themselves can do some of the organizational things we talked about at home in terms of setting up a place to do homework, making sure that they're connected to the school to get the homework in as a secondary piece so they know what's good. But the schools really are going to be the partner that you want. And so whether you have an IEP or a 504 or not, most schools in this problem-solving model we call MTSS are perfectly happy to help you begin to scaffold this for your youngster and to create and implement accommodations that make some sense. And so I hope the parents don't try to go it alone because they're missing a great big tool called the school, which has a very different vantage point, and 6 or 7 hours a day, they're watching your child as he tries to organize and tries to meet the demands and expectations. So I think talking with the school, taking a look at the tech finder on Understood, all of the things we just listed at home in terms of the routines and the checklists and the homework kinds of things, all of those, even for adolescents. Again, you have to have some rationale for adolescents. They don't just listen and say, okay, that sounds like a great idea, because it means they have to change things. It means they have to work pretty hard at this. So they need to understand there's something in it for them, and that the outcome, it's important for parents to let kids know the outcome's pretty durable. You can use these strategies all the way into adulthood, into your job, into relationships, into a variety of other things. But my first suggestion would be go to the schools. They have a ton of things that they already know about. Okay. Parents know their child very well in terms of how this plays out at home. the meeting of those two sort of forces to help kids usually ends up with a scaffolding system that makes some sense.
Okay. Speaking of the school, we do have time for one more question. So we have a
Okay.
parent question that would like some tips on how to help. How do you help my child? How do I, excuse me, how do I help my child to settle into a new school?
Well, we always had the mantra, prepare the situation for the child and prepare the child for the situation.
Okay.
So actually, this is a perfect time if you can arrange it. New schools, in so many different ways, offer great opportunities because you have a clean slate and you're coming into a new environment. Certainly, information will have followed you there. But as a kid, you really have an opportunity to make your way in a new place. And in order to do that, you want to show up on the first day or during the first week with your best foot forward. So, I didn't hear how old the child was. Is that there? No.
No.
Okay. I'll make assumption that it's sort
Oh,
of
going
elementary
to the
school.
second grade. I do see
Between
going to the second grade. I'm sorry. Going to the second grade.
second.
Yes.
Okay. It's so important for little kids, and meaning sort of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and maybe 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds,
Okay.
to get a lay of the land as much as anything else. There's nothing like being a 7-year-old boy in your first day and you don't know where the bathroom is, and you really have to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And so it would be really helpful if you knew where the bathroom was. If possible, it would be great to be able to have a real tour of the school, and that is to really understand where everything is, where the lunchroom is, where the bathrooms are, if you're going to be getting some help outside of your classroom, where that room is. It's also really important as much as possible to have a child meet the people who are going to be either the teacher in a second grade, or as you move into middle school, the team that's going to be working with a youngster. Okay. I think it alleviates a lot of anxiety. A lot of schools, and this one may or may not, but a lot of schools have what they call a buddy program. We had one of those where parents of existing kids who were returning to the school were connected with people who had youngsters coming in new to the school. Okay. Maybe they had a play date. The parents got a chance to talk about the school itself, what the setup is, all of those things. So you're not going in the first day, opening the door for the first time and walking through and hoping that everything, it'd be great to look at a menu. If your youngster's a picky eater, most schools have a 4-week cycle. You get the same stuff once a month, maybe twice a month or 3 times a month. But you can predict that to have a sense of when the days are that your child might want to bring something in of his own, as opposed to having the school lunch. How is the school set up in terms of how classrooms are set up? What does instruction look like? Is there a push-in for people who are going to help with organization with this youngster? What specifically, if he really is struggling with something, whether it's reading or writing or math or organization, what specifically, are the possibilities for intervention in those kinds of things? And again, I don't know whether this youngster already has an IEP or a 504 or both or nothing. But I think schools honestly appreciate that kind of interest on the part of parents. Okay. But the more you can get to know the school grounds, it'd be great if you could hook up with 1 or 2 kids, even if it was just for an hour. And even if it didn't turn out that those kids ended up being friends of your child, at least they would be 2 familiar faces the first day that you go to school. So the biggest thing is to sort of get rid of this sort of myth of the new school. Okay. And give the child an opportunity to come in with a lot of information that just makes this school that happens to be in a different building with different kids and different teachers, as opposed to a whole new experience where you're walking in cold. Even as adults, I think we don't necessarily want to walk into a situation totally cold, and unless we absolutely have to. We'd like information, from the internet, from whatever. Right. The 7-year-old is not going to glean that kind of information before going into a second grade placement. But we can alleviate a lot of anxiety. We can also have teachers have a chance to sort of interact with this youngster for, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes. It makes a difference. It really does, because you really are preparing the child for something new, but you're preparing the new for the child, which is probably even more important.
Got it. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I do want to thank Mark again for joining us, and I want to thank everyone else for joining us.
Thank
You
you.
can always find our archive chats at u.org/calendar. And if you have a question,